Good morning, Canyon View. My name is Chad Gustafson, and I am an elder in this church, and it's an honor for me to be up here. And I'm glad that all the staff here at the church this past week after Tuesday, they were able to take some time off. I know Kirk, he's still away, so I think it's great to be able to allow them all with how much they serve and how really humble. I was just reflecting on that this week, how humble this whole staff is. I personally think we should just give them all a hand for how amazing and humble the staff at this church is and what they do. So Kirk has asked me if I could speak basically in the last week of our Humble King series that we're going through. So you saw probably those big presents outside. Each week they were put up here. We saw how Jesus was the humble King of hope. Jesus was the humble King of peace. Jesus was the humble King of joy, and Jesus was the humble King of love. And so now we're coming to a close. We've come to a close really of the Advent season. Now, in this book, in this little booklet that we got, it actually talked a little bit about what Advent actually means. It's a Latin word. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I know Latin. My children, they come home and they tell me they're conjugating Latin words at school, and I say, I don't know what Latin is, and I don't know what conjugate even means, but that's amazing. But I did a little bit of research, and I see that Advent is actually a Latin word, comes from the word Adventus, and then we're the ones who shorten it down to Advent, but it means the coming or arrival. And we got to really experience that. That's what Christmas is all about, the coming, the arrival of the humble King. That's what the manger really signifies right here. Well, I thought of another word that I always think of when I hear the word Advent, and this also comes from a longer Latin word. It comes from the Latin word adventurous, which shortens down to the English word adventure. And what that means is that something is about to happen. It has this idea, this notion of something unknown, something that is about to happen. And so I want to end this series by kind of having us all think through this and go that may the end of the Advent season be the beginning of an adventure in humility. So may the end of this Advent season just be the beginning of an adventure in humility. Now, about myself, I'm one of these people who I definitely have learned from times where I'm not humble and times that other people have been humble towards me. Now, Pastor Kirk, he's mentioned up here, he's actually called me, I think, crazy from up here, just because I like to run, and anyone who likes to run, I think we all can attest that we're pretty crazy in and of itself, just enjoying doing that. Well, I did this race this past summer, and it was a race in the mountains. By the way, the worship team with that song, I love that song because it's, you're the mountain where I run, and I love how it follows up with the fountain I drink from, because when you run, all you want is a fountain to drink from at that point. So I'm running down this one trail, and I come around a turn, and about 100 feet in front of me, there was a person who was crossing the stream, and they were crossing on 5 little rocks. And I watched them. They looked like a gazelle. They looked amazing. And my feet, they hadn't gotten wet yet. And anyone who runs with wet feet, they go, oh, that means you're just going to get blisters. It's terrible. You don't even want to have wet feet. So I said, I saw that person do it. I got this. I can look like that gazelle that just went in front of me. So I come up to that stream. I hit the first rock. Man, I was looking good. I hit the second rock. The next thing you know, that rock, instead of it being like this, it just went like that. And when you're running and a rock that you're on goes like that, what happens is I went flying into the stream. I actually had hiking sticks at the time. They were thrown down on the stream over here. And I remember just laying there going, my feet are wet. Yep, my whole body is wet. So much for being dry anymore. But there was the next thing I know, I'm still literally laying. I'm not quick to get up when I fall, just so you know. And mind you, just so you know, I always have said, this is a phrase I always say about myself, I say, I've never had a good run until I've had a good fall. So that kind of shows you how clumsy and maybe I don't think through things as much. But I'm laying there in the water, and I see these feet actually come into the water right next to me. And this guy, he comes over, he picks up my hiking sticks, he picks up this, he helps pick me up, and he said, okay, let's go, buddy, let's go, come on. So we started running again. And I got to know him a little bit. We ran for a little bit. He was from Oregon. He actually flew into Colorado for this race. It was a kind of a fun thing, and he stopped his race to do that. Well then, believe it or not, 2 miles up the road, we kind of got dispersed again, 2 miles up the road again, up the trail, all of a sudden I trip over something, and my kneecap goes right into a rock, just solid. And I'm laying there going, oh. And you'll never believe it, but the same guy pulls up right next to me, and he says, man, come on, let's go. You doing okay? Let's go. He jumps up, he helps me, he gets going. I think he ended up beating me, by the way, which I hope he did, because he deserved it. But it was just amazing to see a guy who's willing to stop his race and in humility help out a guy, even get his feet wet, which you don't want to do when you're running, to help out a guy who he doesn't even know, just to get up and stop being clumsy. And that's what happens in life, is I feel like I have all these lessons I learn in humility. The thing is, it doesn't just happen in running, although in running I definitely find that time, but it happens all over the place, in work, with family. I know with my children, I definitely learn lessons in humility. I have 3 children. There was one day I went out for a hike with 2 of them. They were 5 and 3 at the time. And we're hiking back in the woods. We're about a mile back. I got Sam on my back. He's 3. I'm carrying him, and my daughter 5, Adelaide, she's 5. She's walking. We get to this bridge. We're standing on this bridge looking out over this river, and she's drinking out of her Hello Kitty water bottle, rolls off the bridge, lands on this little pebble island. I'm like, oh man. But I said, it's on a pebble island. I could go through that river and go get it. So I took the kids over to the side of the river. Now, this was the day after a big rainstorm, so the river was flowing pretty good. And I'm taking off my shoes. Remember, we're a mile back in the woods. No one else is around. I'm taking off my shoes. I take off my son off my back. I set him down. Adelaide's sitting right there. I take off my shoes. I take off my socks. I'm hiking up my pants. And that's when I caught the glimpse of my 5-year-old daughter, Adelaide, with the biggest fear in her eyes of what her father was going to do, that he was going to leave her, and she didn't know if I was going to come back or not, because I'm going to go through this raging river to go get a Hello Kitty water bottle. And so it was at that moment I realized that God was showing humility in my daughter, who's 5, staring at me with this fear. So God will use all these lessons in your life to teach you humility. And the cool thing is we have all these examples of humility in the Bible. Today we're going to go through a character in the Old Testament. His name is Jonathan. And we're going to see he has just this amazing level of humility that he has as he goes through his relationship and friendship with David. And so, as you'll see with this, humility, it starts with one thing. Humility starts with love. That's where humility starts with. So Jonathan, he was this guy, just so you know, he was the son of the king, son of King Saul. He was not just a guy who was just going to take over the throne, but he was actually really respected. In fact, in 1 Samuel 13 and 14, there's all these Israelites, 600 Israelites, and only 2 of them have anything to go into battle with, and they're Jonathan and Saul, which is the king and the king's son. Because the Philistines at the time, they said, all these blacksmiths stop working for these Israelites so that they don't have their swords to go to battle. So what Jonathan does is he actually climbs up this cliff with his armor bearer, and he goes into this Philistine camp. He kills 20 of them, but the crazy thing that happens from that is there's pure pandemonium and chaos that they start fighting each other. The Philistines start fighting each other, and then they have to flee, and then the Israelites are able to chase after them and overtake them. And so Jonathan is looked at with a lot of respect. So people know that not only is he the king's son, but he's going to be the heir of this throne because he's got all these this power, this authority, and he's not even scared. He's a brave warrior. And then in walks David. David first comes into the king's area to bring him to play his harp for him, to soothe him, to calm him. And then all of a sudden, there's this giant guy named Goliath. You know the story. Goliath comes. David says, I can fight him. and he goes out, he beats Goliath, and then after that, he comes back in to see Saul, and Saul's like, well, who are you? What is your name? Like, this is amazing. Thank you for, all this. Just a short little conversation. But we see in 1 Samuel 18:1, it says, as soon as he, which is David, finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. He loved him as his own soul. In his innermost being, he loved him just as he is. Now, remember, this is the only times you would have seen him would have been coming in and out, playing the harp, and then after this whole Goliath thing. So people think sometimes that you need to really love someone, you really need to know and understand them and get to know them really well. This just proves that Jonathan, he loved David with his own soul, as much as his own soul. And how much did he know him? Doesn't appear to be very well, other than what just happened here. Now, Jesus did the same things. You look at Jesus, he's crying and weeping over a city of many people that he doesn't even know, hasn't even met, I should say. He hasn't even met them, but yet he loves them and he weeps over them. You'll see that time and time again with Jesus, that his love, it's something supernatural. Just like in Jonathan, it's supernatural that he would love David just like his own soul. Now, what happens is, in that chapter, after Jonathan shares that he loves him as his own soul, the next thing is David gets all this praise. People are going out in the streets saying, Saul got his thousands, but David got his tens of thousands. And I'm sorry, but any guy, if they hear that, if you're Saul, be a little bit threatened by that, maybe a little jealous. I would be. And so you have Saul in chapter 19, verse 1. It says, and Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. You see, Saul is threatening. He's threatening to kill David. And Jonathan, instead of saying, okay, like, yes, Dad, I'll do what you say, Jonathan says, no, there's more to this. So Jonathan actually pleads for David's life, and Saul says, okay, I'll relent. I can definitely relent. But what I like about that phrase is that Jonathan not only loved David, but it said that he delighted in him. You think of love, and sometimes you have people like C.S. Lewis. He wrote in The Weight of Glory, he talked about how a lot of people in the world, they're going to look at one of the greatest virtues as being unselfishness. But the great Christians of old are going to say the greatest virtue is love. And C.S. Lewis goes on to talk about how, you have people focusing on the negative, whereas Christians here are going to focus on the positive. And he even says that the negative ideal of unselfishness carries with it the suggestion not primarily of securing good things for others, but of going without them ourselves, as if our abstinence and not their happiness was the most important point. He says, I do not think this is the Christian virtue of love. The New Testament has lots to say about self-denial, but not about self-denial as an end in itself. We are told to deny ourselves, to take up our crosses so that we can follow Christ, and nearly every description of what we shall ultimately find if we do contains an appeal to desire. C.S. Lewis is saying that to take up your cross, it doesn't have to be this terrible, dreadful thing. To love someone just as Jesus loved someone, just as Jonathan loved David, it doesn't have to be something that is self-sacrificial, but in it can bring you joy. That's the end goal. The joy, that's what love is as opposed to what unselfishness is. So we know that humility, it starts with love. The next thing is that humility, it requires choices. Humility requires choices. So we all have lots of choices we have to make. I was reading that it's like 35,000 in a day. Now, I make, choices like running over rocks or trying to go out in the middle of a raging river to get a Hello Kitty water bottle. We all have choices to make. You have a guy by the name of Mark Zuckerberg who he just wears the same shirt every day. He's the CEO of Facebook. He just wears the same shirt every day because he wants one less choice to make. So that's one less choice. So he's only got 34,999. But we all have all these choices, and every choice that we make is is a choice that we can have humility as we make it. So what choices did Jonathan have to make? Let's look at 2 verses after this. The first time he says that he loves him as his own soul. Here's what happens with Jonathan in Samuel 18, 3-4. It says, "Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him, gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt." So there's a lot packaged in these 2 verses. You could do just one sermon just on these 2 verses alone. So what's some of the significance here? Well, a covenant. He makes a covenant with David. Really, a chosen relationship. A covenant is a chosen relationship in which the 2 parties, they make binding promises to each other. And then they're going to work together towards that common goal. So in this, you have Jonathan. He's making this covenant with David. And when you look at what that covenant is, it's really the symbolism that he realizes that David will be this next king. Because it says he stripped himself of his robe. Now that robe, he's the son of the king. It's obviously going to be more than just someone's regular robe. It's a robe signified, especially the son of a king, it's going to signify your kingdom and the fact that you will be king someday. Then he gives him his armor. Now, what I find interesting is I look back 1 chapter before, there was a guy who tried to give David his armor, but he didn't give it in humility. Saul, Jonathan's dad, tries to hand over his armor to David when he fights Goliath. Saul wanted the glory. Saul wasn't looking for this humility, but Jonathan was handing David the armor in humility. David didn't accept it from Saul. David accepted it from Jonathan. And then you have even where he's giving up his sword and his bow. Now, on the western slope, when I think of that, I think of, for most people, to hand over their guns. So, whoa, sorry. Yeah. But really, that's what it is. It's handing over those guns, your sword, your bow. Are you willing in humility to hand that over? And then his belt. This wasn't just an ordinary belt. Yes, it would go around, it would tie everything together, but it would be more of the word that was used was more like a battle belt, where it was something that you earned, something that was earned in like a battle. So all these things were choices. Every single thing that he took off and gave to him was a choice that Jonathan made in humility to show that he was willing to give up this throne to David. Now, there's this whole story of David and Jonathan that's probably one of the more popular stories of the 2 of them together. It's in 1 Samuel 20. So I want to read part of that. It starts with, "Then David fled from Naioth in Ramah and came and said before Jonathan, 'What have I done? What is my guilt? And what is my sin before your father who seeks my life?'" So he has this fear. He's questioning things. And Jonathan, in verse 2, he says to him, "Far from it. You shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing, either great or small, without disclosing it to me. And why should my father hide this from me? It is not so." So you have Jonathan making a choice to reassure, encourage. But here comes David. In verse 3, David vowed again, saying, "Your father knows well that I have found favor in your eyes." And he thinks, "Do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death." But then here comes Jonathan one more time. He says to David, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." Now that's a choice. To say, whatever you say, I will do for you. It's a choice to say that. It's a choice. And he knows that whatever David says, he's going to have to choose and make a choice if he's going to do that. And I think back to this phrase, it's something that you probably hear at weddings. Different phrases like this, where it's vows that are made. I know my wife and I, we made a vow that was from the book of Ruth when we got married, and it was, "Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people." That's what Ruth says in her book, in the Bible. And we actually said that at our wedding. And I think of a lot of other weddings that there's these vows that are made. And it's choices that you get to make. And I know Pastor Kirk has stood up here and he said that, your first ministry that you should have is to your family. And so if any one of you wants to start with humility, and I know I want to start here too, it's It's so good. You can start right with your spouse, your wife or husband, and your kids, and any other family members. It's a great place to start. And so as we go on with Jonathan, he shares this story. So that's what's going on at that point. And then right after this, David, he says, well, tomorrow's this festival that's going on, and the king is going to want me to sit right here at the table. But he's going to want to kill me. So I don't want to go and do that. So I'm going to go, and I want you to tell Saul, your dad, I want you to tell him that I'm going to go to Bethlehem, and I'm there doing a sacrifice. And then if your dad gets angry, then we know that he was going to want to kill me. But, if he wasn't angry, then I guess we'd be fine. But you're going to know, I think, when he gets angry, if he's going to want to kill me or not. And Jonathan, he says, well, I'm not going to let anything happen to you. So what happens is, this whole time comes, the meal comes, Saul's sitting there, sees David isn't sitting right there. And Saul asks Jonathan where David is. And in verses 28 through 34 of 1 Samuel 20, it says, Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. He said, let me go, for our clan holds a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. So now, if I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away and see my brothers. For this reason, he has not come to the king's table. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. Now remember, while we're going through this, Saul is Jonathan's dad. So just remember as we're reading this. He said to him, you son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. Then Jonathan answered Saul his father, why should he be put to death? What has he done? But Saul, again, this is the father, he hurls a spear at Jonathan to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put David to death. And Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David because his father had disgraced him. See, even Saul knew that Jonathan had a choice to make. And even Saul knew that as long as David was alive, Jonathan wasn't going to become king. Now, Saul wants his legacy to live on, his personal legacy to live on. He wants to see his son become king. And Jonathan, he still has a chance to make a choice. See, Jonathan had this prearranged with David that if David's life was in danger, David was going to be hiding behind this rock. Jonathan was going to go out with a boy, shoot 3 arrows, and then tell the boy, if he says to the boy, the arrows are beyond you, then it means it's not safe. But if he says the arrows are to the side of you, then it's safe. So Jonathan, even as he's walking out with this boy, even as he's shooting the arrows, still has a choice that he can make. He could still change his mind and make David believe that he's fine and he's safe, and Jonathan still could then become king. But Jonathan makes the choice to shoot the arrows and to yell to the boy, the arrows are beyond you, which meant that, David, your life is in danger. And then, so we see that it starts with love. It requires choices. But in the end, humility, it leaves a legacy. True humility will leave a legacy. So after Jonathan yells those words to the boy, he sends that boy home, and it's just him and David. And here's what happens in 1 Samuel 20, verses 41 through 42. It says, as soon as the boy had gone, David rose from beside the stone heap and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. And they kissed one another and wept with one another, David weeping the most. Then Jonathan said to David, go in peace, because we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever. And he rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. So you have the future King David bowing down in reverence to Jonathan and weeping the most. I like that note, that they both were crying, but oh man, David was weeping the most. The future king was weeping over this. But this isn't the last time they actually meet. I want to read the last time that David and Jonathan actually meet. Again, by the way, Saul is still coming through trying to kill David. Like, you want to read through 1 Samuel, that's what pretty much the whole thing is about, is Saul chasing after David, trying to kill him. But here's what happens in the last time they meet, in 1 Samuel 23, verses 15 through 17. It said, David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life. David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horesh. And Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David at Horesh and strengthened his hand in God. Did you catch that? He went and he strengthened his hand in God. And he said to him, do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Saul my father also knows this. So he strengthens his hand in God. He points him to God, is what that's basically saying. He's pointing him to God. He's encouraging him, and he's telling him, you are going to be the next king. The last words that he talks about is that you are going to be the next king, David. You are going to be the king. And this is the son of the king right now who should be the normal heir to that throne. But he speaks that. Now, what's interesting with that legacy, what happens to Jonathan? He doesn't even have a chance to become king even if he wanted to. He actually ends up dying in a battle alongside his father. In the same battle, they both die. And David, he really laments for Saul. He laments for Jonathan. And even in 2 Samuel, what's interesting is you don't know that Jonathan, until 2 Samuel chapter 9, you don't even know that Jonathan has a son. It's not mentioned. But he has this son who's actually crippled in both feet, so he can't do work. He's actually living in someone else's home. What David does is David says, he calls out, he says, is there anyone from Saul's household that I can show mercy to for Jonathan's sake, is what he says in verse 1. For Jonathan's sake. Because of what Jonathan did, I want someone to show kindness. I want to show kindness to someone in that house. So he brings in Jonathan's son, and his name, by the way, is Mephibosheth. So he brings him in, and he's crippled in both feet, so he's not able to do any work, not able to do anything. So David says, you know what? I'm going to give you all of Saul's land that belonged to him. I want you to have it. Not only that, then he speaks to his servants, and he says, I want you to go out and work the fields, bring in the crops for Jonathan's son. I want you to do that for him. And also, I want you to sit at my table, at the king's table. He wants him to sit at his table. And so Jonathan, without even realizing it, David is here now showing kindness to his son, who had no way to take care of himself, really, and to make ends meet for himself. He was able to show kindness to him. Now, Jonathan, though, I think in those last words that Jonathan speaks, we see that it's not the legacy of his own life that he's trying to get. When you're saying, I'm giving up my throne to you and you can be king, and I want to strengthen your hand in God, he was actually wanting to point him to God. Point him to God. And that was what the true legacy was. And on the radio, there's this song that Casting Crowns sings. It comes on the radio. It's called Only Jesus. And the words in there, they say, I don't want to leave a legacy. I don't care if they remember me, only Jesus. And that's really the legacy that you're going to leave. It's the legacy of Jesus. With true humility, you're going to leave this legacy, truly Jesus. Now, I've been thinking a lot about a friend of mine for the last couple months who I think has shown just amazing humility in what he does. And the cool thing is I think sometimes, you're thinking, I think like, well, there's got to be something big I can do. Something, great that could be really, humble. And really, this friend of mine, he's just been doing normal things every day, but just doing them humbly. And then his time has come to leave a legacy. See, this friend of mine, his name is Chad, ironically. He's, better looking, actually more athletic too. I think I'm still funnier than him though. But he's a great guy. I've known him for probably 15 years now. He actually wanted to have a change of course in his career, so he applied at the company that I worked at and applied to my department. He actually got a job just sitting 2 seats behind me, and we were in a cubicle farm. In a cubicle farm, you're not really farming anything. you're just kind of sitting there, but you get to know the people around you pretty well, and you also know when free ice cream day is because you got to get to that cafeteria before everyone else. Otherwise, you're going to be in a long line. But this friend of mine, so he comes in 6 years ago, and his goal, he started with loving people. He just would love people and just show them love and kindness. And then he would make choices every day to come into work, to work hard, to be respected in his job. Nothing big, just coming in, showing love to coworkers, being respected, and just really living his life in a very humble way. Never really wanted to advance in the company, so he never, stepped on other people, never did anything. He just wanted to really just show love to the people around him. He felt that's what he was there to do. Well, November 2nd of this year comes, and I don't know if any of you know what happens on November 2nd, but I do every year because it's my anniversary. So this year it was a Friday, and I remember sitting at my desk, and I was just working away, just more anxious just to be done with. It was Friday, and it was my anniversary, so I was like, this will be fun to be done and be able to be ready for the weekend. Well, I had my boss, she called me, and she never calls me. It's, so you never really want certain calls from your boss. And especially when your boss calls and she says, hey, Chad, I don't have good news for you. Because I'm like, oh, man, this is not the way you want to have on a Friday. Well, she says to me, she said, hey, Chad, so Alex, he was on our team, great guy. He would sit right behind me, actually, when I was in the office. And so I got to know him really well. He was a great Packer fan. And being a great Packer fan, he also disliked the Cowboys. So, what can be better, right? And he actually, we actually understood each other's humor, which was also pretty mind-boggling. But my boss, she says, Chad, I've got bad news. Alex, he was at work today, and he fell over, cardiac arrest, ended up dying right at work, right in front of my coworkers, everyone. And my coworkers, they're my friends. They were devastated, and what happened then was that it was a Friday. Everyone kind of goes home, and Alex, he was only 36 years old. He had a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old at home, and so everyone's just devastated as they're leaving work, and I remember in worshiping. I was worshiping right over there on Sunday, and I really felt like God was saying to me that Chad was put into that role at the company for this moment right here. And I called Chad, and I said, hey, Chad, I really feel like this. And he said, you know what? I agree with you, Chad. I said, I was feeling the exact same thing. So what happens on Monday is they actually, all the people in that row, which is about 10 people, they go to a restaurant beforehand, and they just talk through things, talk through what happened, what it means, all this stuff. Because, most of them had never witnessed anyone dying, and most people aren't Christians. They don't even know what happens after they die or anything like that. I got a call from one of my other coworkers as he was leaving this meeting, and he said, his name's Jim, he said, hey, Chad, your friend Chad is amazing. Like, he's got so much wisdom on what happens at death. He's got so much, he's just full of wisdom, and he's just so caring, and he's just a great guy. I'm so glad that he was here for this moment to be here with this team. And by the way, he's a worship leader at a church that we used to go to. He loves Jesus with his whole heart, so he understands. So this is Chad, by the way. He understands all about Jesus, and he just wants to live his life being all about Jesus. And that next week there was a Thursday was the wake. He was asked because of kind of some of the things that he shared in that Monday meeting. He was asked to just share a quick 2-minute mini eulogy. And in that, he let me read it. It was pointing people to having a relationship with Jesus. That's the only way. And then the family at the wake loved that so much that they have him speak at the funeral. Now, this is in front of over 60 coworkers of mine, most who don't know anything about Jesus. And he's able to point them to Jesus in a way that they would have never been able to listen to. How did he do it? He came in loving all of his coworkers, just as he loved himself. He came in making choices every day just to show up at work, to be respected, and to be just just to make Jesus known in simple, small ways. And here was his legacy, that he was able to point people to Jesus. I want to invite Tim up. And that's what I want for myself, personally. I want for myself that I can have this season of an adventure of humility. And I want all of us, may the end of this Advent season be the beginning of an adventure in humility. May the end of this Advent season be for all of us the beginning of an adventure in humility. Not huge things, but in the small things, in the simple things. And I want to end with reading about, now, there's been in this book, if you've been going through this booklet, you've been noticing probably that Philippians 2 has been said a lot about the humble king of who Jesus is. And I think we need to end with a picture of who Jesus is and the true humility he has. And so from Philippians 2, verses 4 through 11, it says, "Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus." So those first couple of verses are about love. Jesus starts off with love. "Who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself." That's a choice. That's a choice that was made. He emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Now here comes the legacy part, okay? Here comes the legacy. "Therefore God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father." And that is true humility. That is true humility. Now today, we're going to be doing something special. This is something we've done for the past couple of years on a Wednesday night. And I want to bring the elders up in front of the stage here. Any of the elders who are here, come on up. And you can stand right in front of the stage. This is something we've done at the end of the last couple of years. We've done it on a Wednesday night. And we wanted to really take this opportunity to do this for the entire church here on a Sunday morning before the start of the new year. Now, what we want to do is we want to come and we want to just, and their spouses can come up as well. But we just want the elders to come up, and we want to be able to bless all of you. And so we want to take this time to just pray blessings over you for this upcoming year and what God may have for you. Now, these are, it's great being a part of this group, and I just want to say they are filled with humility, with some of their life experiences that each one of them have, the wisdom that they have so much humility, and it's a beautiful picture of what humility looks like. So we just want to be available for you, and we want you guys to take this time during this last song to come on up. Now, I also would like the ministry team to come on up as well, and you can come up here as well. By the way, this is John Fleetmeyer, Galen Daly, Glenn Brown, and Errol Snyder. Earl Allfrey and Sam Campbell are also on our elder board, and they're just not here. They're not able to make it. But I want you to see all these elders first, and then we just want to pray for you. So if the ministry team wants to come up as well, everyone can stand, and we just invite anyone who wants to come up now during this song. We're going to stick around even after this song, but we just want to pray and bless you. If you want a blessing from the elders for this upcoming year, whether you're going through something rough, even if you're not, even if you just want to just get a prayer of blessing, whatever you need, come on up, and we just want to pray for you. Bless you guys.